So, what makes me cranky about Season 2 of Luke Cage? It's not airy when you don't understand half the cast, man. Them call him Bushmaster. Most of the time, I just call him incomprehensible. Look, I get these guys are supposed to be Jamaican, but the combination of the slang and the accents makes it really difficult to know what the hell they're saying half the time. Usually, if you're going to do something like that, you either subtitle it, or you have a character in the show to translate it for the audience members who haven't watched Cool Runnings in a while. Though really, that's just a symptom of a bigger problem, which is that, once again, the bad guys absolutely suck ass. Why is it so hard to make a compelling villain that can go toe-to-toe with Luke Cage? The only glimmer of hope I had for Season 2 was seeing that there was going to be a character who could physically hurt Luke, so that I wouldn't have to watch another 13 episodes of randos ineffectively shooting at him. But then he turned out to be relatively harmless, and almost completely uninterested in actually doing battle with Luke Cage. Luke's just occasionally an obstacle to him doing things that, in the grand scheme of things, aren't really a problem, which is the same issue I had with Cottonmouth in the first season. Hell, Bushmaster's even worse, because he's treated almost like he's the hero of the story instead of Luke. So much so that they have to keep making him do really over-the-top evil stuff just to remind you he's supposed to be the bad guy. In fact, I bet if you cut this down to just Bushmaster's story, you'd probably have a pretty satisfying hour-and-a-half movie or so about an anti-hero whose arc is to learn how self-destructive vengeance is. At least, as long as you subtitled the parts with the incomprehensible dialogue. Kinda like how if you cut out the ridiculous amounts of filler from last season, you'd have a solid 2-hour blaxploitation superhero movie. I mean, these Marvel Netflix shows have all had a problem with excessive padding, but Luke Cage is the absolute worst about it. I don't know how you make a 13-episode season that's almost entirely filler, but they managed to pull it off here. It's so unbearably tedious to watch the same thing happen over and over and over again just because they have no other way of dragging this out long enough to cover 13 episodes otherwise. We get Bushmaster's backstory at least 3 times, including a full-on flashback after we've already been told what happened, repeatedly. Once was plenty, especially when it just makes him look entirely justified in his beef with Mariah Dillard. I mean Stokes, since that makes Luke Cage getting in the way seem really stupid. Boy, did that get old, by the way. We get it. You don't want people forgetting her family's ridiculous criminal history. You don't have to correct literally every single person who says it with increasing fervor, particularly because the name change came from her getting married, not some random attempt to escape the stink of her family. She's not hiding from her heritage. She just took her husband's last name, as is the standard Western custom. In any case, there really isn't any reason for Luke to keep getting in between Bushmaster and Mariah. She's supposedly trying to get out of the life, so she's no threat to Harlem anymore, and Bushmaster is only targeting her people, so he's not really a threat to Harlem either. Sure, he keeps talking about how he's going to rule it, but we don't see him really do anything to the civilian population to suggest that's going to be a problem, even if he eventually gets around to it. Plus, Luke isn't exactly a man of much conviction in the Netflix adaptation anyway, so you're not really expecting him to protect Mariah out of a sense of justice or something. You'd think the guy who could barely be bothered to protect Harlem last season would just step out of the way and let Bushmaster tear apart her entire organization, which should take all of 5 minutes since it looks like it only consists of 5 guys for most of the season. I get that they're trying to draw some kind of parallel between Luke and Bushmaster in that both of them are allowing their resentment of what happened to them in the past lead them down a dark path, but there's really no comparison between the two. Luke's supposedly harboring unaddressed rage towards his father that's making him irrationally angry in the present, but the only way you actually know that is because Claire keeps saying so. Until she says it the first time, there's really not much in the show itself to indicate that's what's going on with him. Yeah, he doesn't want to see his dad when he shows up, but beating up criminals is kind of Luke's job description, and the show's never bothered to show him develop a kind of code of conduct, so him failing to exercise restraint is not really out of character for him. His reason for wanting to take down Mariah go all the way back to the last season, so it's not like he's obsessing over her because he has unresolved daddy issues. Luke's big beef with his father is that his father didn't believe Luke was innocent even though he was convicted and sent to prison. Sure, I'm sure for Luke that feels like a betrayal, but it's not remotely comparable to Bushmaster having his entire family defrauded and brutally murdered by their supposed friends and business partners. That's not the kind of issue that can be solved with a few hours of therapy and a quick heart-to-heart with Mariah, like how Luke has one conversation with his dad and all is forgiven. And then there's still like 5 episodes afterwards. So while we're on the topic of Mariah Dillard, Stokes, see how annoying that is? What the hell happened to Alfre Woodard? This season has some of the worst acting of any of these shows, and most of it is coming from her. She's normally a fabulous actress, but she's just so over the top with everything she does in this season. I guess her direction this season was just make this character look as psychotic as possible, which is a pretty far drop from being the only one smart enough to suggest they explore other methods of killing Luke Cage besides just shooting him over and over again. Must be a ton of lead paint in Harlem's Paradise or something, since even the end of the series suggests that just owning the building will corrupt anyone. Of course, the absolute worst thing about this season is the romance between Mariah and Shades, which is so forced and so poorly acted that it's actually kind of disturbing. Nothing about it feels natural. Neither actor seems to know what they're supposed to be showing us, whether it's genuine affection or just some kind of ploy to get one up on the other. And it's just unsettling to watch. Then, spoilers, we end up with a whole subplot about Shades being at the very least bisexual, even though all it does is complicate a very straightforward betrayal by a really good friend and give Mariah an extra dig at him when they're arguing later. Like I said, lots of filler in this season. Even the music is filler. I lost count of how many times the show just stops so we can watch the band playing in Harlem's Paradise for the whole song. At least in the last season, it was music to fit other stuff going on. This season just straight up inserts music videos into episodes. Then the whole thing ends with a bunch of decisions that the characters, at least as they are at the time, would almost certainly never make. With a quandary thrown at Luke that would be better suited for the middle of this season and the whole he's obsessed with vengeance and kind of going off the deep end thing, than being a cliffhanger for the next season. It's just a mess. A long, boring, overacted mess. I can't believe they found a way to be worse than the last season, but here it is. That makes it easily the single worst season of all the Marvel Netflix shows to me. I know most people think that Iron Fist is the worst, but at least that show had some sense of pacing. Plus, Danny Rand may be an insufferable tool, but there are actual stakes for him and his friends, and he has interesting supporting characters to follow with arcs that actually make sense for them. Luke Cage has none of that going for him. In fact, this season is so poorly acted and the characters get so ridiculous that Danny Rand actually looks good by comparison when he pops in for an episode to team up with Luke, and then promptly leaves before the next one even though the problem isn't solved yet. So, just skip this one if you haven't seen it already. Nothing really changes for Luke or the larger Marvel Netflix world that can't be explained in a brief aside that one of the other series will inevitably give you anyway. That's what I thought about Season 2 of Luke Cage anyway. Hopefully I'll get to reviewing Iron Fist Season 2 a little more promptly than this, but in the meantime, let me know what you thought about Luke Cage Season 2 and the rest of the Marvel Netflix shows in the comments below. There's a like button if you enjoyed the review, and if you'd like to join my superhero team, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more reviews.